Good afternoon and welcome to everyone that has joined us today for another inspiring webinar. My name is Elizabeth from Charity Digital and I'm delighted to be hosting this session which deals with HR technology and putting the right resources behind human resources, which at the end of the day is about people. But that doesn't mean we should keep it away from technology. We are all aware that HR plays a vital role within any organization. It's the lifeblood, in fact, of a charity. And the sudden transition to working remotely in the past 18 months, coupled with a more hybrid blending working approach, has put stress on many charities. And it can be difficult to know who in your organization is responsible for HR and who has the time to dedicate to it. Looking forward into a post-COVID-19 world, we'll probably find that managing HR concerns will become more complex. And in this session today, we'll be looking at how cloud HR technology can meet this challenge and where you can start if you are a charity considering an automated or cloud HR system. Now, there has been a last-minute swap with one of our guest speakers, and today we have with us Leanne Hillier, who is Chief People's Officer for the Principles for Responsible Investment. Leanne has been working for the PRI since 2016 and is responsible for driving the HR strategy and overseeing the practices across the organization's global offices. Joining Leanne, we also have Grainne Shaughnessy, and I hope I've said that right, as our other guest speaker who works for Sage, and she's been working there for the last 3 years and is an expert on HR products and works in product marketing. Just before I hand over to our lovely guest speakers, I will briefly mention some house rules. Please feel free to ask any questions at any time in the Q&A, and we'll go over these at the end, and you can vote for a thumbs up for the question that you like. Use the chat function too to share with us your experiences and any helpful advice and tips. In fact, I can't see anyone chatting at the moment, so if you want to get that started and you can tell us where you're joining from at the moment, that'd be really great to know where your location is. We want to make these sessions as interactive as possible. We do have closed captions available, and you can turn these on by clicking on the CC closed caption button. And we are recording this session, and the recording together with the slides and any links or resources will be available online soon. We'll also be emailing these to you in about a week's time. Now, my wonderful, fantastic colleague Sasha is hiding in the background, ready to jump in if we have any connection issues. And also she'll communicate with you in the chat as well. Leanne and Grainne, thank you so much to you both for joining us today, and especially to you, Grainne. It was a very last minute thing, and we're really grateful for your willingness to step in. I'm just going to ask you to whip your cameras on, and I'll pass it over to you so you can get going. Thank you, Leanne. You're actually muted.
Thank you, Liz.
There we go. I'm just going to turn mine off.
Hiya, thank you very much for the introduction. And I've just shared my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, good.
Perfect, good. So yeah, thank you very much for having me, and no worries. I'm pleased to step in. We are going to be talking about what to look for when looking at a new cloud HR software. So my name is Grainne, and I've worked in SaaS technology for the past sort of 10 years or so in marketing and product marketing. And what I find really interesting is the way that we buy anything, whether it's you know, a new handbag, whether it's software or if it's services, has radically changed over the past year or two.
Grainne, I'm just going to interrupt you there. So sorry. Could you just put your mic a little bit nearer to your mouth? That'd be
yes,
fantastic.
Of course. Apologies. Is that better?
Yes, that is better. Thank you.
And yeah, so this session today will just walk through the critical considerations that you need to be thinking about if you're looking at a new HR system. And I'm really pleased to be discussing this with Leanne, who's one of our Sage customers, who can give some first-hand experience and insight into buying HR software for her charity organisation. So thanks very much for participating, Leanne.
You're welcome.
So today's agenda, we're going to take a look at HR technology in the charity sector specifically and spot the signs that you might need a new HR system. We'll then run through the 4 key stakeholders that we've identified and what their priorities are. And then finally, we'll take a quick look at next steps you can take after this webinar to learn more. So let's kick off with how the role of technology in the charity sector has had an impact. So not only have HR professionals had to guide their companies and employees through the transition to a more digital and distributed workforce environment, they've had to sort of contend with a lot of these challenges you can see here on this slide that I'm sure you'll be familiar with. They've also had to learn how to be more productive and successful in their own roles when they're working from home. So both have required HR professionals to learn new skills and adopt new technologies to sort of make sure that they can actually get their work done, complete new tasks that they might not have necessarily been prepared to do before. And then here we've got some really nice comments from HR leaders that work within not-for-profit and charity organisations. And we're seeing a lot of comments here around that their HR team has been vital part of this change during the pandemic and how they've been surprisingly agile. And there's some great stuff in here around, like, obviously it's had an increase on workload, but it's also highlighted how important HR is to driving business success. Leanne, do some of these comments sound familiar for you?
Yeah, they really do. I think I think people have realised that they need to rely on their HR teams, that we've pulled a lot of people through this pandemic. I'd argue most of the operational functions who have often been underfunded and overlooked have risen in prominence over this period. And I think a bit later in the presentation, we'll go over that in more detail.
Yep. And this one I found really interesting. So we've got some stats here. So just under 50% of workers are considering quitting their job this year. So what this is just like really reiterates why HR software is just so important to support your organization. And then another 38% of workers potentially plan to quit in the next year or so, which I found quite staggering actually. Like, are you surprised by those statistics, Leanne?
I'm worried by them, but I'm not shocked by them. I think any HR professionals in particular will have heard David Ulrich speaking quite eloquently about the resignation tsunami, that he states that we've got all of this kind of like pent up desire for people to move. I think people stayed where they were over the pandemic, and now they're trying to kind of, you know, push ahead and make those changes. And so we're, you know, on the precipice of that is what I would say.
Yeah. And I think employees have now got that flexibility. There's so much going on behind like workforce benefits, and I think the job market is now very like, employees have a lot of choice, so I'm sure that's adding to.
Absolutely.
And then this slide here, we just wanted to highlight that, you know, HR technology has never been more important than it is today. So companies realize that HR technology is key to business survival. And just the sudden requirement for remote working has seen HR technology play that vital role to support how we operate as a business, and most importantly, supporting employees as well. And I think you can probably agree with that, Leanne. Like, has that back office infrastructure of having HR software been important for you during the last 18 months?
Absolutely critical. I mean, I think if we hadn't had this in place, we would have really struggled with managing the kind of remote workers and the variety of workers working strange hours in different places. And it's allowed actually us as HR to focus on the kind of the emotional needs and the practical needs that people have had, rather than having to fill in spreadsheets left, right and centre.
Yeah, so it's allowed you to focus on your employees more versus the admin.
Exactly.
So there has been a bit of an explosion in HR tech, and it's kind of been going on for a little while, but it definitely has been accelerated by the pandemic. But
even before this, so the average employee spend was about £352 per year per employee on HR technology. And our research, HR in the Moment, which polls 1,500 HR leaders, it also polls C-suite execs and employees as well. And that's sort of revealed that 75% of HR leaders say they're already using some form of HR technology, but of those, 67% are planning to invest even more, just proving that we haven't seen the last of HR technology growth. And then 59% of C-suite and HR leaders also said that HR is even more focused on that digital transformation as a result of the pandemic. So even though HR leaders are very focused on that digital transformation, HR technology isn't just for HR leaders. I think that's sort of a main theme of the webinar today. So the full offering of HR technology supports and significantly benefits multiple parts of the business, whether that's employees, managers, your finance team, your IT team, as well as the C-suite as well. So it doesn't appear that leaders are always working together when it comes to choosing the right HR technology though. So how do you know when it's time to buy a new HR system? So I mentioned before, HR leaders are very focused on that digital transformation, and there has been for a while, but it's just been accelerated by the pandemic. And we know that admin has increased by those comments in the slide before, you know, workload has increased, but then there's still that expectation for HR to be strategic and look after employee experiences as well. So there's a lot that they've got on their shoulders. So do any of these stand out for you, Leanne, like that you looked at when you knew you needed a new HR system?
I think they all do, but I will focus rather than spending my whole time talking. I think focusing on two, I would say reducing the admin burden in the HR team was probably really critical for me and my team. I think having, you know, HR can be a very compliance heavy, burdensome function, and having some of that taken off you, again, it just frees up the capacity within the team to focus on other value add activities, which it's so easy to get swamped in the admin and just feel like you're being a police force or something like that, which I don't think is helpful. So that was absolutely critical. I think probably maybe I'm looking at it with the lens of the pandemic. Obviously, we implemented our system a few years ago now, but if I was coming to it cold now, I think managing that remote workforce has got to be critical. Like, it's been so useful for us having that system, having a place where we can kind of keep an eye on things, share things, you know, just keep on top of where our people are and what they're doing. And I imagine that's only going to increase. I think so many, particularly office-based workers, are going to be pushing for more flexibility and more home working as we come out of the pandemic, and I can only see that one increasing, if I'm honest.
Yeah, giving employees that flexibility to work where and how they want to, I think is going to be a big one. And yeah, has like, as part of removing some of that HR admin, has that been around like giving your employees the ability to self-serve as well?
Absolutely, you know, going on, logging their own holidays, changing their own addresses, but also for things like our diversity monitoring, we've seen that increase as well, because it's so much easier for people to access and change it, getting people aware of what their records are, but also for our, you know, there's an inbuilt organizational chart function. I can't tell you as a HR person how many hours me and my team have spent on PowerPoint org charts. Like, you know, such a simple thing, but it's amazing how much capacity that can free up. But also things like automated processes where emails go out automatically to our managers when probations are coming up, and we do our appraisals, and everything is built into that system, but it's one single source of truth as well.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a time before without having a system and having to deal with all of those things.
I know.
So who do you need to get involved to find and agree on the tools to support HR strategy? So let's meet the 4 key buyers that we identified. So first up, we have obviously HR and people leaders. Oh, sorry, there we go. So the top priorities for HR leaders, what are they? So the pandemic saw that it was a really tough year, and it was very busy, to say the least. And ultimately, even though this past year has changed up HR's agenda and it's definitely thrown them into the spotlight, the pandemic has enabled HR leaders to become more influential as part of that. So 57% of the C-suite that we polled now see HR leaders as equal leadership partners, despite grappling with remote working and supporting employee wellbeing and all of that admin that came with moving their workforce around and furlough schemes and compensate, like, you know, all of that stuff that was just huge and took up so much time. So as a result of this past year, 60% of HR leaders have experienced that increase in both administrative tasks, but also strategic ones too. And it means that to meet the demands of a uncertain future, or at least to say, you know, it's going to change from day to day, what can you do to help manage those workloads and be more agile and manage your people? And I think that technology is absolutely vital to this. So Leanne, to speak and focus on working in HR in a pandemic, what's been your focus?
So I think one of the things when you're working in a not-for-profit environment, your employee, you tend to have a more mission-driven workforce. They are people that are engaged in what you do, they're engaged in why you're doing it, and it can be a different relationship that you have with your workforce. And for me, having our HR system has really helped with the employee engagement, which I would argue is critical in those mission-driven environments. Having the kind of communications page, having the ability to quickly send communications out to people, having the ability to make sure that we're up to date on all of our data, but without it taking our time up, I think has been so vital. I think one of the things I do find it a bit saddening on this slide that, you know, nearly 60% of C-suites still see HR as purely administrative, despite everything that we have been doing. And I think maybe that has been part of the having to deal with furlough and accessing grants and all sorts of things that have come out as part of the pandemic. Maybe that has, you know, added to that admin burden. But I think it's really important that using a system like this can show how you can add that value add, and looking at the first data on there, the first 60% on there, the fact that we're talking about administrative and strategic tasks is really key for me. Like HR is at its best and doing its best when it's strategic, and I think a good HR system, well deployed, makes that happen.
Yeah, definitely. And at least if you know the majority of your admin is taken care of by a system, like you were saying earlier, that compliance piece, you've got that reassurance, that peace of mind, you can be more strategic and you can focus on those things.
Absolutely.
And hopefully highlight to those C-suite execs that it's not just admin.
Exactly.
So what HR and people leaders should look for in a HR system. So some of the key areas, so we've talked about it already, to deliver amazing workforce experiences, especially when you were looking at those stats earlier with like just under 50% of people saying that they're probably going to move to a different role. Like being able to offer those amazing workforce experiences is going to ensure that you can attract new employees. And then that workforce visibility that we've touched on as well, like getting that oversight of your workforce from one place. And tech that benefits everyone. So the right HR cloud solution should benefit everyone within your business. So as HR leaders, your solution should help you drive widespread adoption, something that delivers a similar user experience to things like apps and technology that your workers are used to using at home. And this should be user-friendly, both for employees and your HR department, of course, as well, to administer. and technology that passes all the security requirements, so it's reliable in terms of its investment, is also key, and we'll touch on that again in a moment. And then this resilience and flexibility one, like I think this year, well, almost 2 years now, has seen that HR needs to be agile, and having software to support them be agile is really important, so they can move from one obstacle to the next diligently and strategically. And that's, without a system in place, it's very hard to be resilient and flexible. And then just obviously across the workforce, increasing workload. You don't want your employees not knowing where to go for stuff and having to send emails and ask messages, and like that's all admin for your employees, but it's also then turns out to be admin for your HR team as well. So if you can increase workforce and HR productivity by having a central system that everyone knows where to book holiday or access key documents and things like that, then that's just gonna improve ways of working. Right. I wanted to include this one in here. So some of the content from today's session is from an ebook that we recently published, which is about how to choose the right HR technology in 2021. And there's a checklist like this against each of the key buyers that we're going to talk through today. So this forms like a really useful checklist that you can go through, almost like a requirements list that you can check off with your key leaders across the business. And it's a really nice way to sort of build out that requirements doc that you need when looking at a system, and then you can tick those all off when you're going through it, and then you'll know that it's going to meet everyone's requirements. And it's a great way of just kicking off that project together with others across the business. Right, IT leaders. So I think just like HR, they are no stranger to transformation whatsoever. They also are a crucial element for the purchasing decision when it comes to HR tech. Did you find that in your organisation as well, Leanne?
Absolutely. My IT team were totally critical in the project, and we involved them at the outset. So we met with a number of different suppliers who came and pitched to us, and they were all of those pitch meetings. They asked their, technical data security questions, things on GDPR that, I may not have picked up on. But interestingly, one of the things that they then focused on, which I definitely don't think I would have done, was looking at integrations and how, Sage People in particular has got open APIs which allow us to get our different systems talking to each other. So again, we talk about the efficiencies. That is like, I can't tell you how many people that's worth having those things happen. But also, I think the security that you get for us from having been based on a Salesforce platform, and we use Salesforce as a business as well. So I have lots of easy access internally to people who know what they're talking about. So they were things that I wouldn't have picked up on if I just went off and ran that project by myself. So they were part of the decision making. They were there in the middle of it. Absolutely.
Good. That's really, really good to hear and very positive. We've unfortunately had many cases where we've got right to the end of like a purchasing decision and buyers just haven't had their IT involved, and it becomes a real issue, and there's lots of I's and T's to cross to make sure like contracts are signed, and they need to be a part of that, right, to make sure you're making the right decision.
Absolutely.
So what are they looking for in a HR system? They're looking for that reliability and security and regulatory compliance. It's about protecting the company and the organization and your people's data. So it's all really important. A good support model as well is really important for IT, because they don't want to be supporting you with the system. They want to make sure that you can get support in the right way. So that's really important for them as well. Powerful integration and flexibility, like you touched on there, Leanne, like that's super important at the moment. And it seems to be a key driver for the majority of people that we speak to when they're looking for HR software, because with technology, we know it comes automation. So why can't I automate from one system to the next, like through integrations and APIs and things like that? So it's a massive driver for a lot of organizations. Why not share that data in those processes? No one wants to be manually rekeying data in anymore, right?
Yeah.
And then, like you were saying as well, that readily available data, like having easy to use dashboards. We also use Salesforce internally, and the dashboards are fantastic for being able to get like information quickly and spot trends. So just having that data readily available just makes everyone's life easier, and not having to download spreadsheets and manipulate them saves everyone a lot of time and makes them more productive.
Indeed.
So I think, yeah, is it worth just touching on a bit more about the integration aspect for you? It'd be interesting to know what you've integrated into.
Yeah,
if
sure.
that's okay.
So we've integrated with payroll. That was the first one that we did. I think any HR and finance people that are on this call will know that's a continuing bugbear between the two teams, trying to get those things sorted. So it's the first integration that we looked to do. We also integrated with our Active Directory. So we actually saved our IT team lots of time, because we set our new starters up, and then they just automatically upload into Active Directory, and there they are in Microsoft. So they love that. And again, we have that single source of truth. Sage People is our single source of truth, and it kind of fields out to different people. We've then integrated it with Salesforce. We use Mission Control within Salesforce, which is like a project management tool within it. And so part of it is tracking capacity. So we need to know when people are on holiday or away, so that we know that so that has been a kind of time tracking. And then we are just about to relook at payroll again, because we are 4 years into our program here, and our organization has doubled in that time. So we've got things have got a little bit more complicated, and we have more systems and benefits and things like that. So we're about to just do a bit of an overhaul on that side of things as well. So I can't tell you how great it is having a system that we know that we can integrate it with pretty much anything that we look at. And I think also in HR, you'll have these little things in all these different places that you but you can bring it all together in the Sage People environment, which I often think, going back to the employee engagement point and the user experience that comes from that, the easier you make it for your people, the more likely they are to do the things that you want them to do, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And adopt the system itself as well, if it's easy. Well, it sounds like you made it even better for your IT team then. So bonus.
Yeah, right.
So next is finance leaders. So we know that these guys are really key, because they hold the purse strings most of the time. So you've got to convince them that this is a good investment and a good choice. So what are the things that they are looking at? And I think what the pandemic has actually meant that finance leaders have sort of moved away from being like explainers of the past to foreseers of the future, which sounds a bit mystic, but it's about pivoting and adapting to that plan to meet new challenges as a result of the pandemic, or, you know, any new changes that are going to come our way. It's just being able to be agile. And organizations really do struggle to make quick, informed decisions in real time, I think, like any organization, if they don't have actionable insights. So, you know, if you've got actionable insights, you can respond to change based on those facts, and you can flex to new priorities. And this is why a cloud HR system is really important. And if you invest in a system like that, then that's got people analytics in it, then your finance leader can help you to spot trends, and you can help them to spot trends and KPIs that would affect basically your finance leader's budget. And another key driver for investing in a modern HR system is the high level of automation it can bring. So we've already touched upon that. But this is really key for them as well, because they're going to be pro increasing productivity in your workforce and getting the most out of the resources that you have through intelligent automation, self-service, making sure that your team is adopting the systems that you're putting in place because they're easy to use, and having that collaboration across teams. And, you know, let's face it, your headcount is usually a massive overhead. So getting the most out of your people is a big green tick for finance. And one of the many roles of HR professionals is to ensure the company is compliant. And with laws and regulations changing constantly, especially during the pandemic, a system that can help avoid any fines or litigation by standardizing and consolidating your data into a single place will help put your finance leaders' mind at rest. So they don't want any unexpected expenses coming their way, for sure. And then finally, just accessing the cost of a system. So this is something that we come up quite a lot, depending on the size of your organization, is like, what's that true understanding of the total cost of ownership? So it's critical to make that buying decision, particularly for your finance department. They need to understand that. So are there other costs associated outside of license fees to consider, such as implementation, support or training that you might need? And so just take a careful look at what's covered in the systems you're looking at and what might be an additional charge, so you have all of your bases covered, really. How did you find it with your financial leaders?
We were lucky, really. They were aligned with us from the outset. But I think, the not-for-profit environment, when you're working in a charity, that outlay of implementing a system like this can be challenging to get past your finance people. And I think it's again, like with the IT, just make them part of that decision-making process, get their buy-in really early on, and make sure that they're happy with it will definitely make things smoother. From my own experience, that box on the HR and payroll and compliance was the thing that did it. It was not just saving capacity in the HR team, it was also going to be saving some of the resources on the finance team. And that was a huge win. But also at a time when GDPR was just coming in. Yeah. And we're so compliant when it comes to GDPR around our HR data, because we don't really hold it anywhere else now. Everything is just within Sage People. So it makes not only the security better, but it also makes the access better in situations like a pandemic when you're all suddenly working from the home. It's all there in one place. So yeah, for me, I would argue, with not-for-profit audience here, that total cost of ownership, you're going to have to give some kind of cold hard facts around it, but all of the other stuff I think help contribute to the justification of the cost, because it is a cost, but it's a very, very good cost to have spent, I would argue.
Yeah, and I think you can build a really strong business case and win people over. So next up we have the CEO. And here, so what is the CEO looking for in a HR system? And ultimately, like we've already mentioned before, your people are your biggest asset. They're what drive your business forward. So investing in your people and software that can support your people and your HR teams do more with your people, then, and deliver that people strategy that's aligned with your organization's goals as well, will help you build, that success, possible competitive advantage and things like that. So building a company that's got really strong core culture and values will be a big priority for a lot of CEOs, and this can be supported by a HR system again. So company culture can be that secret sauce that defines the flavor of the business and builds loyalty and trust amongst employees, but also their customers and the people that they're helping as well. So, and we believe that technology can play a vital role in like enabling CEOs and HR to send things like stuff that Leanne's mentioned, like those tailored communications, or empower them to have that self-service and that ownership of their own data, amongst, gathering employee feedback through surveys on a regular basis, all to help build better ways of working. So technology can help you to support reward and recognition. It's also a huge part of culture and values in your organization. So if you can set up an effective reward planning strategy that's flexible and recognizes and rewards your workforce that aligns to company goals can really contribute to that culture that you're building. Obviously the data decision making we've already talked about, and that resilience again is really important for CEOs. You know, being able to follow that strategic direction and make changes really quickly is going to be key for them as well. Anything you would add from the CEO perspective, Leanne?
I think just emphasising a couple of points there. I think particularly, again, going to the point, we're mission-driven organisations, you know, like it really does embed that culture. It really does reflect your values, and it really, you know, I think it's strong on that side by having a system in place. But I think also, you know, the last 18 months, 2 years has shown us that as businesses, we do have to adapt quickly. And given that the people aspect is often, like you say, our biggest expense, having real-time data, being in a position to guide and influence a CEO into the right decisions to take, given the circumstances, it just puts it right front and center of a CEO's mind now that maybe they weren't a couple of years ago. I think that's a real positive shift that we as HR people can capitalize on a little bit, shall I say?
Yes, definitely. And it all helps with that strategic HR mindset and thinking as well, doesn't it? And it puts that forwards, but first that admin stuff, which we want to avoid or minimize, and it's all about being strategic. Okay. And I think, yeah, if you can partner with your CEO and make sure that you're using data and you're making decisions in the right way. And I guess I hate saying seat at the table, because HR definitely should have a seat at the table, because they are the custodians of your people. So they should definitely, so I hate saying that turn of phrase, but yeah, I think that partnership between CEO and HR is so important.
Critical.
And having that data to back it up will just really drive it forwards more.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to move on to next steps. What should HR leaders do right now today? So think about the problem that you're trying to solve, I guess, because every organization is different and they're on a different stage of their journey as well. So like, what is it that you need to get from a HR system today? And just be really clear on those objectives. And I think, you know, that those checklists, we've got one of those for each of these key buyers that we've talked about today in this ebook as well. And if you can build up those requirements with each of your key stakeholders as well, that will really help make it clear what everyone's trying to get out of a HR system. And then just basically tap into resources and expertise from your vendors as well. So things like ROI, return on investment. They might be able to help you with like an RFP process, which is a request for formal proposal. And that all helps to build that business case and get that internal investment that you need signed off by your CEO and your finance leaders. So building that business case is going to be critical to making sure that you can solve those problems and support your employees and have that strategic role in HR. And then, yeah, just create a checklist aligned to business problems and compare vendors. It's always good to do a matrix on features and prices and things like that. And that will all help you build that really compelling internal business case. Now, Sage Foundation, we empower a lot of non-for-profit organisations, and it would be really good to understand, Leanne, about your situation with Sage Foundation, if that's okay.
Yeah. So when we originally took on Sage, we didn't actually know about the Sage Foundation. It wasn't until later that we found out about the Sage Foundation and successfully applied for it. But even better, it applies to all Sage products. So again, if you want a quick win with your finance team, if they're using Sage, this is it. So we have our discount, I can't remember what it is, but we have our discount applied to all of our Sage products that we use, and most finance teams will use Sage XP these days. So it was like, the minute I told our CFO, you're going to get this discount, he was like, yay, jumping for joy. So if you've got that, again, when you're building that business case, if you already know that up front, it's, again, you're going to tick off another one of your key stakeholders really quickly.
Great, yeah. And I think a lot of a lot of effort and resources gone into sort of building a network around our not-for-profit organisations to support them with tools and resources. There's an online community where you can chat with other organisations, learn best practice, and there's some expert training as well. So there's loads of really good stuff that you can get by joining the Sage Foundation, and it's really easy to apply. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind, and it will help that business case as well. And then finally, just I've mentioned it a handful of times going throughout the session, this ebook that we've created. Please check it out and look at those checklists. You might even be able to take that checklist to your leaders, and it might be exactly what you need, or you might need to tweak it to fit you, but it's a really good starting point. So if you are about to start that journey to look into HR software, I'd highly recommend taking a look at that. And yeah, over to questions. Please ask questions if you haven't already.
So yeah, I've just got a question before we move on. What would be the top tip, do you think, for choosing the right software?
I sort of mentioned it a second ago, like it depends where you are on your journey, and it probably depends on the size of organisation that you are. But I think just being really clear on your objectives and what you're looking for to get from the system for you and that works for you, and not getting maybe like blown away by bells and whistles, because there's a lot of stuff there's some really good stuff going on in HR and payroll, and there's some really interesting ideas coming about where we're going in the future, like things like pay on demand. There's loads of great stuff, but do what sits well with your business at that point in time. But then maybe bear in mind, if you're looking at a system that's got room to grow, or you can build out integrations using APIs and build more of an ecosystem. So I think, yeah, starting with the basics, I'm always a fan of doing that. What do you think, Leanne? What's your biggest top tip?
I think I would add to that as well. I think it's one of the things I realized when we started going and talking to different providers was the myriad of things that you can do. And you can quite easily, especially as a HR person, you can quite easily, I could do that, and I could do that, and I could do that. And it's like, you've suddenly, before you know it, you've actually implemented something that's really unwieldy. And one of the things that I like with our system is we're growing it as we grow. And we're able to turn functionality on and when we need it. So we started purposefully quite small, but we could do that. And so you could kind of like take it from there. I think my other top tip, which is more practical than it is kind of technological, create a project team. That was my best win. Get your CEO and like your CFO in there, get your IT team in there, get anybody who, like, we involved our employee engagement committee so that we had some people voices in there as well, but we were all part of that decision making, and I really think it added to the rigor.
Maybe my connection here.
Don't know who that was.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, like a little task force to help you make the right decision, and then I think that helps get people bought in as well, doesn't it? It's all about getting that buy-in.
Definitely.
And then it'll be more successful that way.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. My interconnection is a little bit unstable, so I'm sorry if I'm going to come in and out on this one. Yeah, we've got a question here. Obviously, we have a variety of charities that are on board, and sort of about the time, sort of, is it expensive, time consuming to bring a new system on? Leanne, how long did it take you from start to finish, shall we say? What is sort of an average time schedule or time phrase or time scheme of things that we should be looking at?
So given I'm a not-for-profit too, so we were up against it. Our workloads were crazy. So I think the time frame it can be done a lot quicker. And I remember being told it could be done a lot quicker, but it's what time you can give to it is the critical component. So from when we approved the system to when it was finally launched and running was 3 months. And I think what I liked about the way that this process ran is that there were very clear planned dates of when we had what was called a discovery day, where we literally sat in a room for a day with the developer going, these are all the things that we do with our policies. And so it was all, then they took it away and built the system for us. Then it was the user acceptance testing that we had a period set out. So there were very defined periods in which we needed to make sure that we booked that time out of the diary. And I would really encourage you to book that time out as soon as you know when it is, so that you can dedicate your time and attention to it. Because there were a couple of things with hindsight that was like, oh, if only I'd have spent a bit more time at discovery, we wouldn't have had these problems now. So it is really critical to buy that time. So whilst it took 3 months, there were peaks and troughs along the way of me and my team having to do things as we went along. The bit before, in terms of choosing the system, you know, it probably took us about a month in total, because we had to do an RFP and we had to get people in and do the kind of, you know, pitch and show things to us. So it probably took another kind of 6 weeks, something like that.
Okay. I guess it does vary, like you say,
It does.
completely. And this sort of follows on the next question. At what point in the process should we start to include IT in conversations when choosing the right software? I guess right at the beginning, right?
Right at the beginning, like we did, and it really helped the process. They helped us develop our RFP. They helped us define what are the things that we needed. They calmed us down when we got excited about the things that we really didn't need. Like, they should be part of that decision making as much as you are. They should be partners in it.
Yeah, okay. We've got a question from Dawn here. I was just thinking, Grainne, if you are answering this, and I'm sure you will, could you just put your mic just a little bit close to your mouth? That would be fantastic. So we've talked about the timeline and how easy was it to stick to it. Now, you said there were peaks and troughs. You said it was a really bumpy ride, sort of a roller coaster, but did you find it was, you know, a real effort, or did you have lots of support and you could just go ahead and do it?
No, I mean, I think there were peaks and troughs in the work. Like, so there were periods where I didn't need to do anything because they were developing the system for us in the background. But then, you know, giving up a whole day in discovery seemed like a hell of a lot of work at the time. But then you go back and you're like, oh God, it was really worth giving that day up to do it. You know, it felt like a lot of commitment. But because I think any technology company, correct me if I'm wrong, Grainne, I think any technology company are really good at project managing these things. So they give you a really detailed plan of all the key dates, and they manage you to those dates, and they have, you know, RAG statuses of how you're performing along that. Like, they made it really easy. But from your side, and it is difficult when you're in HR because you don't know what's going to hit you on any day, you don't. But so long as you make sure that you make that time available in your diary, it's actually quite I found the whole thing pretty smooth. I was expecting it to be a lot bumpier, really.
So that level of service that you had, was that chosen by yourself, or was that something that was established?
It was
standard. That you had customers. Okay.
It was standard in there. Like, Sage people, that's the package that they give you. They don't, particularly if you take a system that's fairly off the shelf and you're not doing too many specializations, which again, I would argue, start easy, start small, don't do too many specializations, don't do too much customization. It makes it far more complex to run the system. But then that's all built into the process, and it's all really well project managed from the side. So I think sometimes, going into like the cost comparisons that we were talking about, sometimes systems can look really cheap in comparison to others, but you pay for that in terms of the amount of work that HR have to do. We took the decision that we couldn't give that, and so we paid a bit more in implementation to make sure that those things happen, which I think Sage gives you that, but ensures a easier journey, I'd argue.
Yeah, I think our team of implementation consultants are experts. They've implemented so many people, so they've seen it all and that helps. So they know what works and what doesn't, and they really do try and keep people to their timelines, because they know that you've made an investment and you want to get the system up and running and get the benefits out of it as quickly as possible. So they'll work really hard with you to make that happen. But yeah, like what Leanne was saying, it does involve investment from your side as well, which is difficult when you've still got to do your day job and sort out, you know, launching a new HR system internally. It's hard, but hopefully we take a bit of the burden and really get stuck in with that.
It's hard to juggle, isn't it? It is.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, we've got another question. What would your thoughts be on using an HR system with volunteers as well as paid staff?
Do you use it with volunteers as well as paid staff, Leanne?
I don't know, so
Okay.
I can't really comment. Yeah.
We do have charity organisations that do both, and what we've found, so we have like a different license type for users that are just volunteers. So it's just like a data only license, as in so it just allows you to see how many volunteers you've got, what the spread of them are, so you can include them or exclude them in your reporting if you need to report that to the CEO or whoever. So, and it just helps with that. I can't think of the word, it's escaped me. Just seeing that overview of like your workforce, including your volunteers. So I think a lot of people are using it in that way. It's, do they still need that self-service? What do they need to get out of the system? I think it's the questions that you need to ask, and I'm sure like all of that stuff can be accommodated by the right vendor.
Okay, great. We've got a question from John. Are there any potential issues or pitfalls when migrating data from one HR system to another?
Yes.
Yes, I thought there would be.
Yeah, there can be, but like, our implementation team have been doing implementations for years, and any vendor that you work with will have implemented people onto their system before, and more than likely probably worked with the system that you're moving from, or at least have some knowledge of like what the issues are that can arise. So I think as long as you're very clear on what data you need to transfer, that can all be managed, and it shouldn't be a concern or a worry.
Okay, I like that point. It shouldn't be a worry, definitely not.
No, that can all be easily managed.
Yeah. We have another question. Are the systems good for volunteers as well as permanent staff and bank staff? Now, you have mentioned that obviously with the volunteers.
Yeah.
So it works well.
So you can definitely manage both, but like I was saying, I think it depends what you want to get out of the system. So like, do they need to book leave like your permanent staff do or your bank staff do? Like, is it still useful for them to get access to those communications? Probably. You could even do different tailored communications to your volunteer staff potentially. I think as long as you're clear on what you need the system to do for the different types of workers you have, then you can make it work.
Okay, great. Now we've got a couple of questions from Victoria. The first one is, I've been looking at some systems for a while and have a short list of around 10. Any ideas, tips, recommendations?
I've seen longer shortlists than that, so that's pretty good, but it's still quite big. I would try and round it down to 3 and have like 3 contenders that you think can do everything that you want, do the matrix that I was talking about, so like against the key features and what you're trying to get out of the system, the pricing, the benefits, and that will help narrow it down. And then I think just whenever I do anything like this, I look at like a little scoring system, so who scores the highest, and obviously that RFP as well that Leanne mentioned, like if you're doing RFPs you could get that from those 3 vendors, so you've got that official proposal and you can do a really like for like comparison and due diligence.
Okay, due diligence indeed. Now Victoria goes on to ask, what's your experience of having an HR and finance system amalgamated, i.e. HR and payroll together?
It's what everyone wants these days, HR and payroll together.
I'd argue it's the best thing that we did, having them integrated. It's really saved so much time. Again, we've got the single source of truth. We know that we're not holding 2 different systems of data. Like from a HR perspective, I wouldn't necessarily buy a system where the HR system can run payroll. I would buy a payroll system, I would buy a HR system, and I'd look at them that can integrate. It's far better. You get the best out of both of them.
Yep.
The best out of both worlds.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yes, well, do you know, that was right on cue. We have come to the end. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. A massive thank you to you both for delivering this really valuable and informative session. Thank you. Those are really good. The questions were great. If you do have any more questions, then do you have a slide on there that anyone can contact you on? for anyone that wants to follow up, maybe on your last slide, or we will put it in the resources anyway.
Yeah,
That's
and
fine.
you're welcome to connect on LinkedIn as well. I'm really happy for anybody to track me down and ask me through there. I'm always happy to share my experience in HR.
Brilliant, brilliant. Just to let everyone know that we will have the recording put on our website soon, and obviously, like I mentioned earlier, that a recording and the slides of this webinar will be going out to all participants. We do have another webinar coming up, Charity Digital 1, which is on the 12th of August, which covers the Microsoft donation changes and what you should do next. And don't forget, everyone, to be more digital with our Be More Digital fundraising day on the 14th of October. If you haven't signed up for this, then go over to our website and do so. That's brilliant. Great. We are on the time that we have allotted for this. So thank you so much. Thank you, Leanne.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Grainne. That was really good. And we will all say goodbye now to all our participants. Thank you for joining us today.
Bye.
We hope to see you very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye now.